All right. Thank you, Ashley. And of course, thank you all for joining me on today's webcast. I am really excited about this one as this is a really fun topic for me. There's so much to cover, and it was really hard for me to whittle this one down to just 1 hour. We will be doing a lot of jumping back and forth from PowerPoint to live demo, so pardon any awkward transitions here. All right. So I typically like to do presentations that show a very linear workflow as far as the space-time continuum of a building project is concerned. And it turns out that renderings are typically done when a project is later in the development stage or when some major decisions have been made as far as overall design and materials are concerned. However, the focus of this presentation is about rendering, so I am planning to start off talking about what happens after clicking the render button, and then focusing briefly on native renderings and then a little more with cloud rendering. Then hopefully I will have time to circle back and talk about things you should absolutely consider before clicking the render button or everything below the waterline, according to my meme. So we'll talk about some topics that tend to get overlooked, but can make a big impact on your final images. These will include camera views, some geometry tips, materials tips, and some things to consider for lighting. So let's try to split open and melt some of this iceberg. And let's pretend we did a whole bunch of work and we're ready to go ahead and click that render button. But I have two options. I can render locally on my machine, or I can do a cloud rendering. So how do we decide which to use? Well, let's take a look at some basic factors that might affect our decision. If you don't need your computer while you render, then local might be fine. If you just need a draft rendering that could easily take less than a minute, then there's no problem rendering locally. However, for the best quality renderings, this could take many hours. So not only would you not be able to use your machine for Revit during that time, you are also at risk of losing the rendering when it's done. Whether there's a power fail before it finishes rendering or a restart script that runs at midnight. I've actually had that happen before, or just any other reason you couldn't save the image once it's done. If you need a super high quality rendering in a relatively short amount of time, then for sure do a cloud rendering. It can usually spit out the best quality available in less than an hour, sometimes way less than that. There's a catch, and that is you will need to use cloud credits. So, of course, the cloud rendering uses these credits, and these credits do cost money. So how does this work? Well, every Autodesk user gets 100 credits just for creating an account. So you get 100 for free. You might not even have known that you have those. And if you didn't, you probably have access to those. Once you burn through those, you will need to purchase more. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe you need to be on subscription in order to purchase more. And I think they sell them in packs of 100 for roughly $100. In other words, about $1 a piece. So everyone always asks me, how many credits will a rendering take? Well, I put together this image to show the various combinations for just a plain still shot render. You can see that it is free for standard or medium quality rendering, and is later in the demo here I'll show you what those look like, and it's actually pretty good. But the worst case scenario is 16 credits for the best possible image, or roughly 16 bucks. I mean, we should be able to bill the client several hundred or more for a rendering, so this will more than pay for itself. So here's some questions that always come up on this topic, and I got some answers for you right here. So everyone always wants to know how many cloud credits you have. Well, you can always find that at manage.autodesk.com. And here, I'll go show you that briefly. Wrong window. So here's my manage.autodesk.com account, and I'm over on the cloud usage tab, and you can see for me, we've got I've used 447 out of our 750,000 cloud credits. So that's where you would go to find that information. The other one that always comes up is, do you need to keep Revit open? And once you click render, you do not need to keep Revit open. In fact, I think the official answer from Autodesk to this question on the AKN is click render, go to the bar. So it's that easy. You'll get an email when your rendering's done. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and take a look at our Revit software and talk a little bit about some local renderings. All right, so this is a little 3D camera view that I've set up, and if I'm ready to just render inside of Revit, not worrying about the cloud just yet, I would just want to do a typical rendering on my screen here. I can start off, and of course, as always, if you've seen my presentations before, we've got our favorite plumbing consultant to help us out. So to start the rendering process, you can do this a couple different ways. You can click on the View tab and the Render button, or I like to come down here and click this little teapot icon down here. When you do that, that's going to bring up your rendering dialog box. And we'll just kind of work our way through here, see how far we can get on this. All right, so the first button here, we're going to hold off on this. This is the render button. This is after you've set everything and you're ready to just run a render. This button right here that says region, this is really useful if you just want to do a little test render. You don't want to take the time to render the whole thing. You just want to do a little strip just to kind of get a good idea of how part of it's going to look. So it'll render a lot quicker than the full image. And then, you know, if everything looks good, then go ahead and run the full thing. If I turn that off, that will disable it, and we're back to a full rendering. And moving right along here, for the settings, we've got draft, medium, high, best. Now I can run a draft rendering probably in a matter of seconds, and I might actually run one of those for you guys in a minute here. But you can dial up the quality as much as you want. Just be careful here, because the higher the quality you set, the longer it's going to take. The nice thing about this is with the new rendering engine, you can set it to the highest quality and just let it go and stop it when it gets good enough. So maybe I've got the clients coming in an hour and a half, and I just want to get it as far as I can. Just start it, and you can stop it when it gets good enough. So I clicked on the edit button here. if we were doing custom settings, we could do a certain amount of levels, or you could click this until satisfactory button and just like I said, let it go and kill it whenever you think it's good enough. Yeah, that's pretty nice for people that haven't used rendering in a long time. Yeah, you used to not be able to do that because it would render one line at a time, and if you killed it in the middle, you would just get like the top half, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out workarounds for that, so this is much better. Now for ours, for the resolution, we're just going to do it on screen, take way less time here. Then for lighting, this is critical as well. You've got some options here. This is an exterior shot. I could do sun only, or if I want to see some of the lights on inside the building, I could do sun and artificial. And of course, if we're doing an interior rendering, we've got options for those as well. The sun settings, I'm going to skip that for now, but you've got options. Typically, I'll just set it relative to my view. If you really want to get the exact sun angle at a certain time of day, that is absolutely possible. And then I think we'll talk about artificial lights a little later. For the background, you've got some options here. I like to do sky, few clouds. And I think I'm just going to do a quick draft rendering. Just to show you what will happen real quick. So before I ever do a higher quality rendering, I'll just do one on draft really quickly to get a good idea of what it's going to look like. And I'll be able to tell a lot of information just from that. I'll be able to see, hey, is the lighting going to be all right? Do the materials look right? Are my shadows good? Is there anything that's out of place or just not rendering correctly? And you won't have to burn a lot of time to understand some of those things that are happening. So I can tell right away that this is going to look just fine when I do a higher quality rendering. So let's pretend for a minute that I actually did take the time to do an hour or two rendering. This is critical. You never ever want to X out of this rendering dialog box because you'll lose whatever you spent the time rendering. What you always want to do is these two buttons down here. You can save it to the project as an image, so you could use it for your cover sheet or whatever you need. But this is critical right here. I always export it, and that will let me save it out as either a JPEG or a .png, and that way I have it. I can always access it later. I spent the time to render it, so I'm going to want to be able to get that image. So always do that. And you do have some exposure adjustment tools here. You can make it brighter or darker. So yeah, obviously that was a little too much, but just a couple things you can do here. Just a few adjustments can be made. And I think that's pretty much it as far as regular Revit local rendering. So now let's say what happens if we want to render in the cloud. So again, if I X out of the rendering dialog box here, we lose our rendering, but hopefully, for that it was just a draft, I don't care. So ready to do some cloud rendering. How do I do that? Well, if we click on the view button up here, we're going to click render in the cloud. And this dialog box can pretty much be ignored. You can click that and you won't see it next time. But as I go through this, we have a lot of options here. So it's going to ask me, hey, what view do you want to render? And the one that's listed here is my active view. We could render more views at a time if we wanted to. You can absolutely do that with this checkbox. Output type, for now we're just going to do a still image, but we'll also talk about the panorama today too, because those are pretty neat. For render quality, on standard, medium image size, look at that, 0 credits required. If we change it to final, medium, it's only 1 credit, but it'll dial up from there. We could go to large all the way to maximum at 16 megapixels, and that's going to be the most amount at 16 credits. File format, I don't think this matters because I'm pretty sure you could download any 3 of these once it's uploaded. But once you're done, you just click render. See, the estimate here is less than 10 minutes. And you can check that box to email you when you're done, and you're good to go. So once you click render, I'm not going to do that now, but once you do, you can go about your business in Revit, and you can do whatever you need. So if you want to get to your render gallery, you can click on this button. You don't even need to go out to the web, but I've already got it punched up here. It'll take me right to this dialog box here. And let me check my notes, make sure I didn't forget anything super important here. Okay, yeah, I think we're right on track. All right, so you can see a few projects that I've got selected here. If I click on this one that we were looking at, I rendered a couple a few days ago. Here is a final image of one that I rendered. So you can look at these on the cloud. Give that a minute to load. There we go. So once I've got this image here, the first thing I'm probably going to do is just download it. So I'll click the download button here, save it to my hard drive. And then you've got a few other options, different things you can do. Well, you know what, let me talk about the download, because this is where you could download any of these other file types if you want. All right, so let's take a look at some other types of renderings you can do. You might have noticed that when I did render in the cloud, there was an option for a panorama. Let me change this to a final quality. Let's see. Yeah, so that can get up pretty high there. Depends on the resolution. That would take up to 48 credits, but I'm going to show you ones that were done with way less than that and what these look like. So if I go back to, I'll go back to a more interesting view here. So this one right here, this is of my lobby space. Oh, zooming too fast here. This was done, this was a free version. And basically it just takes your camera view and gives you a 360 view, and you can just really experience the space. And look around as needed. Pretty neat. All right. I've got another one that I did. I'll go ahead and show you that too. This one, I can't remember the detail level I did on this one, but it was probably pretty low. So you can just kind of look around. I don't have any sight trees or anything. I probably should have added some of those out there. Got one little tree. But really pretty powerful stuff to kind of understand your 3D space here. All right. Let me see here. All right, so let's jump back into the PowerPoint very quickly. All right, so we looked at our cloud rendering. And I bet everyone's curious about the difference in quality from a free rendering versus a 16 credit rendering. So here is one of each. Can anyone tell the difference here? Maybe, but not really, right? So that is good to know. If you are doing just a digital presentation, you might be able to get away with a free rendering. How cool is that? So if you're having trouble, the one on the left was 16 credits, and the one on the right was 0. So, I mean, yeah, you might be able to tell a little bit. More than anything, just the shading at this scale. But let's go ahead and take a look at Windows Explorer here. And, well, hang on. Yeah, let me go back here. Yeah, so again, this is the 16 credit one on the left, 0 credits on the right. All right, so in Windows Explorer, let's take a little look here. So I'm going to open up both of these. And when you start to zoom in, that's when you're going to be able to kind of tell the difference in quality. So on the one on the left here, let's zoom into my sign up here. You should already kind of start to be able to see the difference here. It's a lot more crisp. You can see the brick and the shadows are a little more crisp. Everything's a little more grainy on the free one. If I pan over into the lobby here, you can tell a little bit of a difference there too. But when you're zoomed out, you know, just getting the big picture, pretty cool that you can get a free cloud rendering pretty quickly, done just like that. All right, so let's go back here. So like I said, if you need to print this out for presentation boards or marketing handouts, you should for sure do the best final quality. And even still, that's only going to cost you 16 cloud credits. All right. So now we are going to get in our time machine and go back and spend a little time talking about how we got to this point. So according to my iceberg meme, this would be at the bottom of the iceberg, so way below the water line. If you are not familiar with Revit camera views, they are super easy to place in your model. An understanding of how to correctly work with camera views is critical to a successful rendering. I typically start with a site plan, especially for an exterior view. Make sure your view is set to not crop so you can see everything. Then I've got a little video showing how this works. So then I find the little tiny down arrow next to the 3D house icon. And then from that, you select camera. And let's watch the video again, because I did that pretty quick. So your first click is going to be where you want your camera placed. The second click is going to be where you want to look, and then it places it in there for you. So you need to make sure that you click far enough across your site, because anything that is beyond where you click will not display. And I'll show you how to fix that later. So if you are not 100% satisfied with the location of your view or composition of your frame, you can use the walk tool. And let's go ahead and see how that works. So you can click the navigation wheel from the navigation bar, and then click the walk tool. Walk to a new location, get it exactly where you want, and then you're good to go. So let's watch that again. So I usually drop the navigation bar about an inch above the bottom middle of my screen. Press and hold that walk tool, and just use my cursor to go the direction and speed that I need to go. All right, so this is kind of critical too here. If you use the walk tool and or change the view from when it was originally placed, this next step is critical. You need to select the crop region, easily visible in this hidden line view as a solid rectangle bordering your view. Once it's selected, click the Reset Target tool. So let's take a look at that. So if you click on that, that brings up the Reset Target button. Click on that, and that will capture the new location of your camera. If you don't do that and you just click Save on your file and exit out, it's going to default back to where you originally placed it. So very important step right there. So while we are on the topic of crop regions, be very careful when dragging the edges to change the display. This can cause distortion. I'll kind of show you what I mean right here. Your best bet is to select the crop region, and I'll show you that in a second here. So let's just see what happens if you start dragging the edges of the crop region. So as items that are closer to the camera start to get super distorted here. So like you can see those risers just look really bad. So the best method is to select your crop region and then click Size Crop. And you can change the width and height. You can scale it, and it will grow symmetrically around the center point. Now, you might not be able to tell anything changed in the view if you kept the proportions locked, but if this were on a sheet, it would be the new size. In fact, to illustrate that point, here is what this would look like when the view is on a sheet. Here I will need to activate my view, select the crop boundary, click on Size Crop, change it. Now you can see it update. Of course, I will now have to deactivate the view, move the view to a good spot, and finally move the view title to a new location. All right, so this one is great. I love this, and I'm really happy to spend some time talking about this. So some of these tips that we're going to talk about are useful for non-rendered views, but I don't want to overlook the importance of using these early on in schematic design. You can use some very simple techniques here to enhance hidden line views, shaded, or even realistic views. These can be super useful in early design meetings and client presentations. So let's take a quick look at what's going on here. All right, so let's say I want to put in a camera view here. And I'll use my walk tool to kind of get to the place I want. And it's just not a whole lot going on in this view yet. And I can do things to start cleaning it up. I'll change it to a fine level of detail. I can switch it to a shaded view. But let's go back here and click on the graphics display options. This is what we're going to talk about. So one of the big things here is under before I talk about that, yeah, let's talk about silhouettes here. Right now it's set to none, but if I switch that to wide lines and click apply, look what happens. You get very thick lines where geometry meets. So it makes the drawing pop out a little more. Maybe wide lines was a little too much. Maybe dial it down like 1 or 2, because you can see maybe for the for my joist it's a little heavy. But if I turn it off, you can see the difference here. So yeah, there's a happy medium here. I just might need to adjust my lines. All right, so the next one down here that makes a huge impact is shadows. So we can cast our shadows, click apply. See how much that makes a difference. The other one is ambient shadows. This is huge. If you turn that on, what this does is it adds in these little shadows, like right here where surfaces meet. So it's really about how objects interact with other objects in your model. So they have, it's just a little subtleties in the way the light reflects. So if I turn it off, you see it's a little flat. Ambient shadows gives way more depth to your model here. Another one that I want to talk about here is for the background. Right now it's set to none. You could do a sky or even a gradient. I'll talk about the gradient right now. I really enjoy messing around with this. For sky color, I'll keep that normal. For the ground color, maybe we'll change this to maybe like a site or grass kind of color. Let's click apply there, see what that looks like. So starting to see what's going on out there. So that's helpful if you haven't had time to model in your site yet. At least you have something out there. Horizon color. Maybe I want this to be more of like a sunrise or sunset kind of image. So that might be a little overkill there. Let's dial it down a notch. All right, so it just gives it a little more color. It doesn't have to be perfectly perfect gradient here. Maybe change that a little bit. So you can play around with these and really have a lot of fun. You can also do an image and really find any image you want. And actually, now that we're talking about that, if I go back to my cloud renderings here, here's a great example of one that I actually did with an image. So everything that you're seeing in the foreground here was modeled in Revit. So the balcony and all that, but I wanted this to, you know, be like a nice resort condo at the beach, so on Fiji or something. So I just did a Google image search, and instead of rendering a sky, I just inserted this image, and it rendered the image behind the Revit model. So very useful stuff. So this is when you could actually go out to your site, stand where you have the rendering looking, take a photo, and then use that image for your actual shot. Very useful if a client says, hey, you know what, I want to see what my view looks like from my apartment window. Maybe you're doing a renovation, you could just go in there, take a picture, and then drop that in the background of your rendering. All right, so I think I talked about everything that I wanted to on here. Let's see. All right, so the next thing is walkthroughs. These are kind of fun. So you can really quickly throw a little walkthrough together, and let me show you how to do that. All right, so if I go to my site plan here, went too far. All right, so under 3D view, walkthrough, really all I have to do is just start clicking where I want keyframes to be. So I'll just click a few keyframes here. Maybe I'll just stop short of the building. All right. Then if I click Edit Walkthrough, that should be good. So I will go ahead and take a look at my walkthrough now. You can see it listed in your 3D views. Or under walkthroughs, there we go. Let's open that up. Click the crop region, edit walkthrough, and I'll just work my way back through the keyframes here. So now I have a little bit of an issue. You can see I'm not seeing all the way back. So what you need to do is change your far clip offset, maybe like 1,000 feet here. And now I'll see the whole building. All right. So let's just play it real quick. I'm just in a hidden line view just to make sure that the speed and everything like that looks pretty good. And I'm pretty happy with that. So what I would probably do is do this on like a shaded or realistic view. And maybe do fine level of detail, shaded or realistic. And possibly add in a sky like we had talked about before. But when you're ready to export that, you just go to File, Export, Images and Animations, and then Walkthrough, and choose the settings that you want, and let that go. I'm not going to do it right now, but it only takes a couple of minutes. So I do have one that I already did here, so I'll go ahead and punch that up. And this is what it looks like. So this is a realistic view. This is not a rendered view. You can actually do a rendered one, but it's going to take a lot longer to spit that out. So let's save this as an AVI file, and it was probably about 200 megs just for that short little image or short little walkthrough. All right. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I thought it was worth mentioning that you can't really have a good rendering without good composition. You could spend as much time on the most photorealistic materials and lighting, but have a really boring view. So I always give a little forethought to my initial placement of my view. One thing that helps is the rule of thirds, or more simply, just put the subject of your frame off to the side. This will make a more dramatic or dynamic and enticing image. So here we have a lonely palm tree centered on the left and off center on the right. Here it is with some guidelines. This is kind of a silly example, but wanted to illustrate the point. Notice mine aren't exactly thirds, but it still helps. And here it is again without it. Another thing to avoid here is coincident edges. Take a look at the bench in each of these photos. The one on the right has been adjusted so the top does not fall in line with the edge of the sidewalk. This simple adjustment will add a lot more depth and make it easier for the eye to read the image. This is especially true if the colors are a similar shade. So just something to look out for there. Okay. All right. So now that we're starting to talk a little more about modeled elements, one thing I like to avoid is overlapping geometry. This can cause a few issues. Your best bet is to try to avoid overlapping elements, but when not possible, make sure to use the join geometry tool. That will add in the edge lines as shown on the right. So you know what, I can even show you guys this in Revit. So here's what it looks like. All you have to do is select one of the model elements. That brings up your Modify Walls contextual ribbon. Click on the Join tool here, and then just select the slab, wall, and they'll clean up for you. All right, so coplanar models. All right, so this is another byproduct of overlapping elements. I usually see this when I have modeled a floor slab and the structural model has the slab modeled in the same plane. This causes that flashing effect when you walk through your model, or extra lines or splotches on the face of the material. To avoid this, I usually make sure to hide the category for one of them. So let's take a look at this. So you can see those lines there. That's the effect I'm talking about. And when you're moving, you can see that flashing. All right, so I made it pretty obvious to find the problem geometry in this video, but most of the time the edges will be overlapping, so it might be a little harder to isolate the problem surface. But that should take care of it. Just one of those things that you might have seen before, but you weren't really 100% sure what was causing it. Okay. So that is probably enough for now on some pertinent modeling techniques. I'm now going to talk about materials first, then some lighting. Of course, I could probably fill an entire hour on either topic, so we will just hit what I think are some of the most important issues. So in case you missed it, there was a giant overhaul to materials in 2019. There are new assets that take advantage of Revit's physical-based rendering engine. The old materials still work just like they normally would, but now you might see a little orange tag on the old materials. You can still use these, or you can edit the material and swap out the old asset for one of the new ones. In this case, I selected the oak flooring material, then clicked on the Appearance tab, and then click Swap Asset button, step 3 there, and then step 4, just choose one of the new assets. Of course, they are the ones that do not have the little orange flag next to them. Materials parameters. These are pretty useful as well. If you have one piece of furniture that is always going to be the same material and never changed, then you don't need to worry about this and can safely apply the material in the family editor and load it into any and all of your projects. However, if you want to control the materials inside the project environment, then you should use a material parameter. To do this, you need to open the family, and in this example, instead of assigning a material to the selected geometry here, I click the little tiny button next to by category, and that will allow me to create and assign a material parameter. Once you reload this back into the project, you can go ahead and assign any material in your project to this element. In addition to understanding materials, lighting is another topic that makes a huge impact on your renderings. One of the biggest issues you might notice is that your lights are not illuminating the space. This could be because the actual light source, I'm talking about this little yellow object inside your family, that's the actual light source. If that is modeled inside your geometry of your light fixture, it will trap the light inside the geometry, and you will get a warning if you do that. To avoid this, just make sure that the model geometry is either slightly above the light source, and you should be fine. Lighting elements take a long time to render. Therefore, you really need to turn lights on that are shown. I'm sorry, let me reword that. You really only need to turn on lights that are shown in your view, or lights from adjacent spaces that provide indirect lighting for your view. Luckily, there's a tool to help facilitate this, and that is called lighting groups. So from within the rendering dialog box, I choose artificial lights, then new group, then assign the lights to individual groups that I need either on or off in any particular view. And that should, in theory, speed up your rendering time. All right, so here's an example of a rendering I did that, for whatever reason, I just couldn't get the lighting to render the way I wanted it to. If the interior was perfect, the exterior was washed out. If the exterior was good, the interior was too dark. So instead of tweaking the settings until I got it perfect and wait for it to re-render, I took the two images I already had and easily photoshopped them together in a few minutes or seconds probably. So you can see here I overlaid the images and deleted out the old windows, and it was left with the good exterior from the old and nice interior view. Cheating? Maybe, but the end result is exactly what I wanted, and I didn't have to burn any extra time adjusting the settings and re-rendering. So using the same example, you can see here I have added a piece of fake artwork to the wall. I did this using the Decals tool. This will allow you to add an image to almost any surface, and it will render the image as part of the scene. So I think I got some time here. I could actually show you guys this in Revit. So here I've got this blank wall. And if I want to add a decal, I'm going to go to the Insert tab, click on Decal, add a new one here. It will put my avatar here. So I click Browse up here for Source File. And of course, it took me way back, so you get to watch me browse. So I can put in any image here, click on the surface, and it will place that in there. So now I've got my mural on the wall, and this will be part of it when I click render. If you want to add a new one, notice when you click the decal button again, you have to go into edit type. Maybe I want to make one for Mario. I'll have to click duplicate. Okay. Edit the attributes for Mario, swap them out. And now we can stick Mario in there too. So that's how you would add a decal. Pretty cool stuff. Here, let me go back to the PowerPoint here. So if you like what you've seen today, we have a class that covers most of these topics except a little more in depth. The one-day class that covers rendering is called Conceptual Design and Visualization. We add these to the schedule based on demand. So make sure to let your Hagerman and Company salesperson know you are interested. Here are some links if you want to see the syllabus yourself. And of course, all of our other training courses can be found on the site as well. In fact, let me show you the website and give you a couple tips here. So from our main page, you can go to Professional Services, Training, Course Catalog. And if for some reason the list doesn't populate here, press and hold the control key and reload it, and you should get the whole list. And even if you don't see something on the schedule, just contact us and we're happy to put one out there. And yeah, I think with that, we're probably right on time here for some Q&A. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up to Brett. If there's any outstanding questions out there, I'll take a look at the Q&A pane as well.
Dan, I only have one outstanding question, and it looks like that person has left.
All right. So if anybody else has any other questions that you've been patiently holding till now, please go ahead and feel free to ask away. We still have several minutes left.
All right, there's a couple more that just came in. Do you want to take those?
Yeah. Yeah, so for the 360-degree rendering, let me show you how to do that. Super simple and fun too. Very fun. So you go to, from any 3D view here, let me go from this one. Yeah, so let's say I've got this view here, render in the cloud, continue, and instead of still image, panorama. That's it. That's all you do. And it's going to look like this. So this one I actually did at the highest quality. It's very, very large file, I guess. So it takes a little bit to load, but you can, so the building looks great, but the outside site, there's not much to it, but you got 360 here. I guess there's our sun. Oh yeah, so one thing also worth mentioning is, yeah, you can also make a stereo panorama and use it with like a Google Cardboard glasses, but not really sure how to demo something like that over a webcast. Maybe on our next one we'll look at that. All right, let's go. Let me open the question pane again here. Yeah, so the next one is about using IES files for lighting, and yeah, that would be the recommended way to go. Absolutely for lighting. I think, yeah, for that one I could probably do another hour-long topic just on that. Let's see. Looks like Simon wants to know, do I think traditional rendering will be replaced with real-time rendering? Yeah, I mean, and it's getting better. We've seen a lot of that with Revit Live. It's real-time rendering. So hopefully, I think so. But maybe if we're not there yet, we're pretty close. So I see a question here. This kind of made me think of a workflow. It's wondering if you could render a plan view. Yeah, you could. Yeah, you'd have to do it in 3D. So you could do a 3D view and just do a section box, and you would still get the effect of a floor plan, but you'd be able to render it. But yeah, it would have to be done from a camera or a 3D view, not from an actual floor plan view. All right, so give another minute or two for any other questions. right, so let's see, a few more coming in here. Yeah, if you want to show the cameras on the plan, yeah, that's a great question. And I use this all the time. If I go to a site plan, I could take any of these views, right click on it and say show camera, and it'll show me where it is. So you got to be careful here because you can actually like drag it to a new location. But another thing that's nice here is you can copy these out, like right click on it, say copy it to clipboard, and paste it somewhere else if you want. So like if you've got a bunch of settings that you want, so you could do all sorts of fun stuff like that. Looks like David wants to know how you do a walkthrough going upstairs. For that, you know, it would probably take a lot of work. You know, you'd have to work with the camera views in your section cut and just kind of, you can take your keyframes and instead of having them at the eye elevation of 5'6", and in my case 105, for that keyframe you would just bump it up each time, and so maybe you'd have one at the bottom of the stairs at that elevation, and then one at the top of the stairs for a keyframe at 115'6". All right. So yeah, I'm not sure if there's a way to. Oh, I see what Megan's saying. She wants to know if you can actually print the camera, not just see it. I'm not familiar with a way to do that, but maybe you could create a detail family, and once you know where the camera is, you could just plop it right down on top of that. That's actually seems like a really cool workflow. Maybe I'll work something out for that. All right, so I think we might be right at the top of the hour here. So I think if nothing else, I'll go ahead and hand controls back over to Ashley. So thanks a lot, everyone, and thank you, Brett.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. This will conclude our broadcast. If you think of additional questions, you can simply reply to the confirmation or reminder email you receive from GoToWebinar. We can get those to Dan or whoever, or your sales rep, to get your questions answered. Once again, if you could just take a few moments to fill out the short survey, we do appreciate your feedback. And thanks for attending the webcast today, and have a great day, everybody.